Hey, Councilmember Brown, it's Quinn. How's it going, Andy?
So, hey, pretty good. I was putting on mute because I have this big yellow lab dog who is sometimes sleeping and sometimes being the guardian of the door.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got my little 15-pound Shih Tzu who thinks he's about a 50-pound lab dog.
Through this process, I was like, why did I get a yellow lab? I should have gotten a smaller dog. This is not a good strategy. I like your artwork, Quinn. I was going to text you yesterday and tell you that.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you. It's like the one piece of art in this apartment that I own. Everything else is either like sports memorabilia or just random stuff.
No, same thing for me too. So I get it.
Yeah.
Hey, Andy.
Hey, Quinn, it's Elodie.
Hey, Elodie.
Hey, can you switch my name again? It didn't show up apparently when I went to my settings and did it on my iPad. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Am I on, Quinn?
Yes, sir. How are you, Councilmember?
How are you, Kevin? I see.
Hey.
I see that.
Hey.
Hi, Andy.
Hey, Elodie.
Elodie, I see you. Yeah.
Hi, Councilmember Brown.
Hi, Elodie. How's everybody today?
Doing great.
Doing pretty well.
Great.
It's a nice day outside. It's really pretty. I
It
feel like
is.
I'm affected by weather now. My mood is affected by weather.
Well,
Nice.
when you're retired like I am, the weather dictates what you do each day. And I don't particularly want to do Zooming today. I think we're going to be Zooming all afternoon, aren't we, Kevin?
Yes, sir, you are. At least for that one, I get to sit in a big room and watch it on a big screen.
Okay, that's all right.
When we waiting on Scott, is that who we're?
Yeah, we're waiting on yes, yeah, Scott's a chair, and then I guess whoever else. I don't think we got a good indication of who's going to be joining us today, but
yeah. Andy, have you been working from home?
Yes, we've been doing the telework probably for about a month now.
Yeah.
So primarily I've been at home.
How's Bob doing? You know, he could be suspect to, you know, with his immune system and everything. Is he doing okay?
Yeah, he's doing okay. He's been working from home too.
Yeah.
I think his doctor had recommended that primarily. And so it's worked out pretty well.
Okay, well, good.
I'll tell him you ask about him though. He may be on this.
Hey, Scott.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? How are you, Kevin?
Good. Quinn, your committee chair is here now.
excellent. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for being here today.
Likewise. I'm really hoping that we'll have, you know, the full committee join us. I know that Myron Worley responded and said that he was going to be unable to attend. And the only other one I really heard from was Pat Madden, and he said he was going to try to make it, but with the loss of his father, he was a little uncertain as to whether he can make it or not. But I have talked to a few others and have some feedback to share with them, with the group, and hopefully the others will join us here in a minute.
And Scott, I guess even if they don't join us, what we can do today is just kind of try and get maybe a plan together to accomplish what the mayor has asked us to do in the next week and a half. and then we can kind of disseminate that information with the rest of the group after this meeting.
Hey, Scott, do you know everybody?
I feel like I know some of you all through email communication, but I don't know. Fred, I know that it's been a while since you and I met, but I don't know that I've met Andy or Elodie, and of course I've just seen Quinn through the communication that we've been having ongoing just in the last week or so. But it's certainly a pleasure to meet everybody via these Zoom meetings.
Looks like we
Yeah,
got
have you
Pat
been
now.
doing
Yeah,
any
hi, Scott.
Zooming,
I'm-
Scott?
Yeah, we've got Patrick Madden on here. So, Scott, if you allow me, I've got a little something short I've got to read at the start of each meeting before we go ahead and call this to order. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, state of emergency, and Governor Beshear's executive orders regarding social distancing, this meeting is being held via teleconference pursuant to Senate Bill 150, as signed by the governor on March 30th, 2020, and Attorney General Opinion 20-05, and in accordance with KRS 61.826, because it is not feasible to offer a primary physical location for the meeting. So with that, Scott, I'll let you take it from there.
That amen?
Amen.
Well, yeah, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for agreeing to participate in this. I see we've had someone else join us. Is it Taryn?
She doesn't have any mic on.
She's
I think
still connecting
she's
to audio.
trying to connect her audio here. Yeah.
Can y'all hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Who was that? Was that
Is that
Pat?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes. Thanks for joining.
Yeah,
Pat.
can you hear me?
Can hear you, and I certainly can. And one other that we've got in the group here is Kathleen Turner. Kathleen is with Langley Properties, and she's going to help keep me organized as we manage and try to go forward through that. So thank you for joining as well, Kathleen. Well, as obviously outlined through Kip's communication and others, obviously our three main areas that we want to focus on is the assessment of the current situation, resource recognition, the blueprint for reopening businesses and public interaction, and the plan of lessons learned in the economy in the future. And I did put out to the group the questionnaire, and I've received some feedback, and we'll continue to collect all of that and hopefully collectively put that together to share with everyone once we've gotten everyone's feedback, and would request, if you've not provided comments, that you do so in the days to follow. For today's call, I think the goal in mind is to answer the three questions that the mayor really wants to know. And I'll just start with them in order in which I was provided. And that is, what are your plans for reopening and the benchmarks or guidelines that are needed to reopen? And even though some of the folks have not been able to join our call today, I've gotten some feedback and certainly welcome, Taryn or Pat's insight into this as we start to reopen, and any feedback would be certainly appreciated.
Pat, this Councilmember Fred Brown,
Yes,
just wanted to share my condolences with you and the family about the passing with your father, and I know you're going through some difficult times there, both in the family situation and business, but I just want to let you know we were thinking and praying about you.
Well, I appreciate that. And I got to say, I haven't had the chance to review the materials on this, which I'm sorry, but I figured it was still worth me joining, but I apologize.
Oh, absolutely. You're a big player, I think, in this particular area that we're talking about on how do we open Hamburg back up?
Yeah, yeah.
Certainly, and I would echo the same thing to you, Pat, and understand, that, even though you haven't been able to look at everything, I'm certain we can hopefully work through it and, share with you a couple. Let me just start with sharing some feedback that I've received in talking to some other retail-minded folks, and specifically Elliott Logan and some of our retailers that we've got. One of the comments that he feels is this is talking about reopening. One of his top challenges that he feels we need to take into consideration, and that is marketing dollars. Marketing dollars to hopefully spread the word and, just hopefully overcome the persona, the perception that's going on currently. And, perhaps there would be a way to focus on some of our retail corridors as we look into this. And that's specifically maybe more for the Hamburg area and maybe the Nicholasville Road corridor. I'm certain there's others, and I don't mean to, not include any others, but obviously those are the two that come to my mind. I don't know how anyone else feels about that, but certainly I thought that was a very good top challenge to take into consideration.
Are there any city dollars? I mean, are there any or I'm assuming no, but let me ask you on this. How much discussion has the city had with the stores that are open currently, i.e., Walmart and Lowe's and Costco, Staples has stayed open through this thing as well as Cabela's and Sportsman's Warehouse, although those two I think are limited. Then the liquor stores, both Liquor Barn and Total Wine have been open. And to my knowledge, pretty uneventfully, which is a good thing. I think Walmart had one person test positive, a month ago or something, and that's the last I heard of any negativity coming out of the operation of any of these stores that have stayed open. Is that a fair statement? Does everybody agree with that?
It's a very fair statement. Very
Okay.
accurate.
Walmart's the only one I'm aware of, Pat. I would agree.
That had the one the one person. This is in Lexington, and they had over in the was it Cynthiana? Some other. They had another person there, but as far as Lexington goes, they had one person test positive, and I didn't hear of any negative ramifications from that. That doesn't mean that there weren't any. But I mean, Walmart certainly has done a lot of study on this, right? I mean, on how to operate under these circumstances.
Oh, I think, yeah, they have, and Sam's and Walmart and I guess Lowe's
Costco.
and Costco. I think they've all got some valuable lessons there. But Quinn, I don't know what Kevin, I don't know what the mayor. I think she's going by governor's guidelines and really hasn't gotten involved in any of these particular retail establishments.
Yeah,
Councilmember,
we've been following the governor's guidelines. Yeah, I mean, those would usurp anything she hasn't disagreed, but they would usurp anything she put in place anyway under the executive order. So yeah, and the stores Pat mentioned, obviously, those did get okay to stay during the process. And, when we've had stores ask, and I think this goes to Pat's question, we just have them contact the governor's office.
Yeah. Well, when we were looking at this retail, I think restaurants and bars are pretty much in another area. So even though they're in Hamburg, of course, we're probably supposed to center on the retail stores like that are there, the pet supplies, and they may be open, Marshalls and the other Kohl's and those other stores there. Aren't those the retail stores that are still closed?
Yes, I mean, yeah, and that was the impression I had, is that you have a separate group dealing with restaurants, right? Right, Kevin?
Exactly.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, yeah, so we're supposed to be focused on the retail stores, right? And they are still closed, and I think the governor's order, they can't open until they're the last tranche. Is that correct? From what I remember
Yes, that's
seeing,
what
which
he-
is like May.
Yeah, Pat, he said they will probably most
You're
likely
talking
be the
about the-
last. You're talking
You're
about
talking about the
restaurants.
25th?
Yeah, the 25th, right? Right, weren't they included in that or not?
The 25th is the third third item in phase one, and that's when the barber shops and the salons can open. And but I don't know that there was any detail on the retail stores.
Quinn, remind me, he has not set a date on restaurants and bars, correct?
Right.
That's my understanding. I went online before we jumped on just to try to get some dates, and it's my understanding that the majority of the retail will be reopening May the 20th.
Right.
And then I don't think there's been any announcement. I was really hoping to see something today or last night from the governor about restaurants, because I from what I've read and heard, that will be in phase two, but I don't think there's been any guidelines as to the dates in which phase two will be rolling out. At least that's my understanding.
Yeah, Scott, that's correct, and it is May 20th that the governor has identified as the first date that retail stores can open. But I also think it's worth mentioning that the governor has said while retailers are able to reopen legally, they've got to be able to meet those 10 rules for reopening that I believe were sent out to you all before this meeting, and I can pull them back up here if you'd like to go through them.
Well, I think there's some points in there that we all need to be aware of. And, in talking to some folks, I think they've made some very valid points. And I'm going to speak more to the smaller retailers than maybe the Walmarts or the Costco's. And, it seems like there needs to be a plan in place that is for everyone, and not anything that discretionary against the large or small retailer. And what I'm talking about that is, these new 10 things that they've outlined that need to be in place, such as healthcare checks and masks and gloves and, things of that nature. I don't believe those are going on with, say, when you walk into Kroger or when you walk into Walmart. And why should that be different than walking into a small retail shop when you've got probably less people in those stores to begin with? That's at least been a concern addressed to me.
Well, when we're dealing with retail stores, I guess we need to identify, we got the malls, and then certainly that's the big ones, but there's still some differences in the type of malls we have. For instance, Fayette Mall is all enclosure, and of course Hamburg is
Open air, right?
I don't know if anybody, I don't know if anybody's looked at that aspect of it, because I think it makes a difference. I think Hamburg would make a difference as being open air, as long as I guess you have a mall association of real retail people, and you do in Hamburg too. Have they been involved in this, in talking to their individual people?
Is there some Fayette Mall on here?
No, unfortunately, Myron Worley was hoping to be on the call, but apparently he had a call with his corporate office today and to talk about this very thing. He did give me some feedback, and it wasn't a great deal of information, at least at this point. It sounds like they're still reviewing, and I think, Fred, you make a valid point. and compared to a place or location such as Pat's stores or somewhere at the, say, Lexington Green or even the Summit. And but I guess once you get into those businesses or retailers, is kind of what I was speaking to. It just seems like there's been more restrictions placed on these smaller retailers than perhaps what currently is going on at the moment for Kroger, Costco, Walmart, et cetera.
Yeah, the smaller retail, I mean,
Well-
I'll just, give you an example like Stuardo's, the olive oil place I have. I mean, he's just, he runs it himself. He doesn't have a staff. He does, I mean, in one sense, there's less people that'll be, it's just him. He might have a couple people come every once in a while, but I agree with what you're saying. It's you don't want to make it where only the big person can reopen, right? That's what you're saying, Scott, right?
Yeah, I agree.
That's the point. That's the point.
I agree.
I'm trying to look out for the smaller, and not so small necessarily, but just not the big, Goliath of say Walmart or Costco, Kroger, because we've got a lot. To me, those guys are doing great. I'm pleased to say that they are. I think it's the retailers that we rely and count on so heavily to be that secondary or tertiary retailer in our centers, whether it be, another clothing good or a nail salon or hair salon. And of course, I know all of those are different because of the service. But I just think we need to maybe suggest that the practices that are in place going forward need to be consistent.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I look at for the small businesses is, does every one of them have to have their own plan, or can there be a consensus plan under the CDC, which is social distancing and probably wearing a mask? And I'm not sure that those smaller retailers would have to do the same thing as a Kroger or a Costco. But having said that, I don't think we need a individual plan for each of those businesses. I think we need to have a universal plan for them as well.
Well, I think that, I think the most important thing to remember is we're trying to figure out how we help our businesses open safely. But the underlying here is they've got to be done, whether they're the large retailer or the small, in accordance with the governor's directives on reopening. And, the larger ones probably are already ahead because they have people looking at this all the time. You guys deal with them more and probably have the resources to find what they're going to need. So I think part of that conversation is too, how do you address the one person shop like Pat was just talking about on the olive? How does that guy get what he needs, and how do we communicate with him what he needs to reopen safely?
Well, I think that's a big
right,
question.
And to that point, I don't know, one thing I've heard is, let's just take some of this PPE gear that's required. I'm hearing that everybody is trying to obtain that, but obviously you go out on any of the internet sites, Amazon or wherever it may be, it's hard to get some of the face mask or the hand sanitizer. Perhaps we could come up with some sort of a source to provide this to those retailers so that they can be able to purchase that and have it available.
Hey, y'all, this is Kip Cornett. We have 3 of the 4 major retail centers represented on the call, which is awesome. And I was just curious if you all have done any polling at all of your tenants to see, it's 13 days away that they can open, which, you've got everything from getting work schedules, people, different, not just the safety, but just what it takes to kind of reopen a business. Some people open a key, like you said, Pat, and it's them, but others, it's far more complex. But I was just curious if you all have done any polling of your tenants that are planning on open up by the 20th or not. I'm not sure what even value that has, but I was just curious since we have 3 of the 4 here, and what level of interest that your tenants have opening when they're able to open.
Okay, I've had intervening circumstances this last week, but prior to that, the only discussions I had were not about getting open, but were requests for deferment of rent, and I've had hundreds of those. But I'm talking to any basically of the operations people. I've talked only to the finance people, I guess, of all these places, with the exception of the real small ones, in that case, we didn't speak about reopening. They hadn't sought out my opinion, and we didn't discuss it.
Got it. How about the other 2? How about Summit and Lexington Green?
At the Summit, we have been kind of just polling and asking our tenants to tell us when they plan to reopen. With a lot of the corporately based ones, it's kind of hard for the local managers here to get that chain of communication. But I found within the last few days, a few of our tenants are trying to open with just curbside delivery and pickup and seeing how they can make that operation work. So I think they haven't explicitly said they're going to open on the 20th when they're available, but I think they're trying to ease their way back into maybe making it happen that day.
Yeah. I have talked to the majority of ours at Lexington Green, and, really with the exception of the restaurants, I think they all anticipate opening May 20th, with the only exception primarily being, I think, for the nail salon or salons. Those, and maybe perhaps the hair salon, are the ones that I'm hearing are still trying to determine a plan as to have not only the customer safety in mind, but their employees.
Okay, thanks.
Scott, this is Andy Johnson with Commerce Lexington. I was just going to say, it seems those essential retailers that have been open have really put in place a pretty good roadmap that I think even if you're a small business all the way up to the big stores, that really is a good roadmap to following some of the governor's guidelines. I think some of the questions would be around, the capacity that you would set inside the store. I know people have set different ratios of what they are allowing in, and some of the smaller retailers that maybe only have one person on staff, sometimes that can be difficult to monitor if you're checking someone out and you've got people coming in. And then with the face mask, it's kind of hard to regulate with the public. If somebody comes in without a mask on, what do you do? I think these have been some of the questions. I know with the health checks, that's the minimum guidelines from the governor have, specifically said that's for employees and that you can do a sort of a self-administered process. And I don't know, it's saying my internet connection is unstable, so y'all may not be able to hear me, but those have been some of the questions I think that have come up on our end. I don't know if that helps in this discussion or not.
No, I think that's certainly a valid point. And I've actually, gotten some plans for reopening from some of the national tenants, whether it be restaurants or retailers in general. And I think that they do have plans, and I'm certainly happy to share those to anyone that may want to look at those. And maybe collectively, I'll try to put some ideas together and share that with the group.
Is it possible, when you're talking about small businesses, for them to have some signage there that says these are the CDC guidelines, or the governor, the same, I think, the governor's guidelines, that we are operating this store in our reopening. And if you've got that with those small stores, then the customer can go up and see exactly if they want to go in that store if they don't want to go in that store. But then you give everybody the opportunity to say, yeah, we're following the guidelines. And if they do that, then I think you've got to let them open up without, whatever they've got to do, whether they have to have masks inside or not. It's going to have to be up to the individual stores. But if they say we will follow the CDC guidelines and print that up there, then I think they will follow them. And the whole idea, is getting customers back. That's the thing people aren't recognizing is, when are we as customers individually ready to go down and sit in a restaurant with other occupants, with other patrons, or when are we willing to go in? I don't have any problem at all going in Kroger's. I wear a mask and gloves, and we stay distant. I don't have any problem going into Lowe's or, under the same auspice. But I don't know why we can't do that on the little stores too.
Right.
You want me to make a motion? I'm good at making motions.
I think Kevin's trying to say something. Kevin, you're still muted.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Todd, how much do you all work with? You've got the larger stores, but some of the smaller ones, how much do you all, you probably haven't had a chance yet, but how much do you all plan on working with them on how are you going to reopen? Maybe here's what some other of the larger folks are doing that you might want to think about. Is there any of that kind of engagement going on?
Well, I think as Pat alluded, probably the last 2 weeks, most of my time has been dealing with tenants that are wanting to address rent deferments and some sort of rent abatements and how we can help. And if certainly, we're just trying to gather all the facts and information and, come up with a plan that, we think that it is a reasonable plan, and not only just at the current moment, because I think currently most all of these people that I'm dealing with seem to be that they're in a pretty decent shape, because they've all either they're big enough to absorb this issue, or they're maybe a big retailer that still remains open, or B, they're smaller and they've received the PPP money. For those that have received that PPP money, we're starting to see, or have been receiving, most of our April and May rents. But having said that, my biggest concern is for these tenants when businesses open back up and there's so much uncertainty and the government aid goes away. What I think we've got to all be prepared to do to try to help these retailers is kind of going back to that first message, is maybe marketing it so that they will return, because assuming there's no more aid in say June, July, or throughout the remainder of the year, I think that's where they really stand to have a potential issue, if that is, of course, if the customers and consumers don't return. Did I answer your question, Kevin?
Kevin, let me say this. I've not had a discussion with the tenant. And of course, like I said, this week, it's been lost this week. I've had no discussion with any tenants about how they should open. And in fact, where you're open air like I am, the leases generally say, leave me alone kind of thing. As long as I'm complying with government, you can't tell me to do this. You can't say so I guess under the structure of the nature of the beast with open air centers, Summit's a little bit different because it's got a lifestyle component where you've got apartments on top of it and things like that. But generally for open air centers, there's not a lot of landlord control about what goes on, how they open or whatever. Nobody's of course anticipated something like this happening either, ever. So it's sort of uncharted territory, so to speak. But I have not had any discussions with any of the 200 tenants I have about opening, which I know that seems weird, but at least that's the nature. That's the way a lot of these open air things work, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Did Michael Dahlhair just join, it looks like?
He did,
Yeah,
yes.
I do
I
see
just
Michael.
joined.
Michael, thanks for joining us.
Sure, thank you, Scott.
We're just talking a little bit about a game plan as far as reopening. And I know, Michael, you deal with a lot of the national tenants and retailers. You know, if there's anything specific that, you know, you're hearing or seeing as far as any guidelines as far as these retailers opening in the next couple of weeks or a month or so, you know, certainly feel free to add anything that you feel.
Now, I don't mean to be talking now with what you just said there, Scott. I mean, I can easily obtain information from, you know, Kohl's, Bed Bath and Beyond, Half Price Books, you know, all these other Hobby Lobby. You know, the tenants, the larger tenants that aren't open, who have a national footprint, I can get something from them easily, though. That wouldn't be a problem.
Right.
And guys, I have to be somewhere at 1:45. I'm sorry.
Pat, thank you.
And I'm sorry I wasn't better prepared for this.
No.
Yeah, we certainly understand.
But this is something very important to me. So however I can help, and I will endeavor to try to get some information from some of these other tenants once I get back on my feet. Okay.
Certainly.
Thank you, Pat.
All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks for joining.
Hey, Pat, can you hear me? It's Michael. Did he just hop off?
Yeah, we can hear you.
He
Yeah.
just left.
Okay, I'll text him separately. Go ahead.
So I guess the third question here that we've got to really address for the moment is, what is your process for scaling back operations in the event we face a second wave? Which I think is a very valid question, and one that, you know, I think we all hope that does not happen, but certainly have to be prepared for it in the event that it does occur. Taryn or Michael or anyone else have any input on that? Any thoughts or feedback? Michael, you're muted.
Michael.
Again, at this time, it weren't. Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Taryn.
Oh, I think at the summit, we're again in a unique situation where we are open air center and do have the mixed use component. So I think it's just preparing our housekeeping teams and then just to maintain that level of cleanliness that's to be expected once customers do return, but then also preparing the businesses for how, if we need to scale back again, to maybe not do so in as an aggressive of a way of completely shutting down once again and moving to the different operations of the curbside and how they can still maintain business.
You know, and I think along those same lines, that's kind of what I'm hearing. Hopefully the request would be considered that, you know, they would be given the opportunity to change their business practice with input, obviously, from the governor.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of maybe completely closing it down, it be maybe limited to, say, 50% occupancy, or obviously put sanitizing methods in place throughout the day. Maybe hours of operations could change and be reduced to accommodate these types of matters.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have any input on that end?
Well, is it on the subject of imminent reopening, Scott? You faded out on me for just a second.
The question is addressing us and scaling back in the event we have a second wave, so that maybe we can prevent from a complete closure as what we've just currently gone through, and perhaps come up with a strategy to limit that if it does in fact come back maybe this fall.
I've got a list of maybe 100 public and private consumer companies who have either opened in the last 10 days or are imminently opening, and it's got a little cheat sheet of what they're doing. Nowhere on there do I see the plan B. I think their view is let's get through the next couple of weeks and go from there. But I get these on an almost daily basis. So when I see that, I'll send it off to you.
That would be helpful.
You know,
I don't think anyone's head is there right now.
And Scott, that might be helpful if the folks like Michael, Pat, you, and Taryn who have these properties, kind of like a checklist that Michael was talking about where he's seen, or maybe we can take a look at those between now and the next time this group gets together and kind of use the benchmark to work from.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah. I piggyback on the back of Kevin there. We've got somebody's in charge of the properties when we're talking about malls, especially Hamburg and Summit and Lexington Green, etc. So that would be certainly an area that they could convey to all of their tenants. But then I think the missing link there is also retail associations within each of the mall areas. I would think that they would have an association and officers that could lend some information to us.
Hey, Scott, I just texted you. One overview is probably, I don't know, dozens of retailers that just opened with pictures of what they look like. Some of it's critical. You're welcome to forward that to the group just to give them an idea of what's going on kind of coast to coast. And I think in the bullet points, it says what some of the businesses are doing.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, this is, I did receive it and I'll certainly look it over. Thank you, Michael. Yeah.
Sure.
Very good examples. Very good examples. I think what he just sent me is obviously, I think, signage and recommendations to reopen and stay healthy. So I think that I'll definitely share that with the group. Okay. I guess with that said, we'll continue to work on this questionnaire. And, it was my understanding, Kip and Kevin, Quinn, chime in here. We were trying to, for today's meeting and today's purpose is to try to, answer these three questions that the mayor was wanting to know. And we'll certainly continue to gather further facts and information to provide and give you feedback from there.
Scott, that sounds great. And I think taking a few days before our next meeting to kind of go over, kind of maybe like as Kevin mentioned, put a composite document together that uses some of the best practices that you all have at your disposal would be good, and I think would be useful in creating our final report out to the mayor. And just as a side note, something to remember, the governor has asked local governments and businesses to put forward these plans to his office so that he can better inform specific sectors on the guidelines that they need to reopen. So this final report that we're working on right now will be seen by the governor and could be used statewide as some sort of model or guideline. The key thing to remember is we've just got to work under the governor's 10 rules to make sure that we're in compliance and that nobody gets shut down. Because at the end of the day, I think that's the worst case scenario. Everybody wants to reopen. Everybody wants customers to come back in. We just got to do it as responsibly and as safely as possible.
Understand, certainly.
Ed Scott, I appreciate you mentioning the questionnaire, which again is not meant to be a definitive document by any stretch of the imagination. So I hope people, and again, you know, it was just, gosh, Monday that, you know, we got everybody on board here. So it's been, this train's moving pretty quickly.
Right.
So hopefully you'll have a little bit more time to spend answering some of those questions, giving pertinent feedback. I think, you know, Michael, everybody has given some excellent thought to this. And I think we, you know, obviously need to continue to get more to fulfill the task the mayor wants. And, you know, I think, you know, we talked a lot about reopening and what it's going to take there. And I think, you know, that there needs to be some energy spent on the recovery side too. You know, whether it's that marketing question, whether it's, you know, how we communicate to make sure that we, as much as we can, re-energize the customer base out there, because I think we've seen with people that have opened before us, it's not like people are running in the doors and, you know, all that. I mean, it's a very staggered approach. So I think it's great that we're getting everybody to collaborate in all these different areas, not just reopening, but how do we make a smart recovery as well. So hopefully by the next time we get together, you all will have a little more time to answer some of those questions, continuing to give this some thought, because we're not going to be able to solve this in a 45-minute Zoom call. It's going to take some time.
That's right. Well, and you know, I just want to say thank you to Quinn and Elodie for providing the information that they have. I've tried to digest as much as I can and want to make sure we're providing you all, or the team, what everyone's looking for. And, you know, hopefully we will see a good recovery in the, you know, days or weeks or months to follow.
You know, Scott, I think one of the things that Kip and Mary Quinn said early on when we were talking to them, and done right, and this may even require a second phase after you get past the opening phase, we can be better positioned moving forward to be successful than we even were originally compared to most our counterpoints. The other item we probably need to take care of, Quinn hadn't gotten to yet, is if you want to go ahead and try to set the next meeting and instead of going through the special meeting process.
I think we probably should, and you know, I know it's always hard to get everybody's schedules to line up with one another, and I think that's probably one of the results of obviously having just a select group of people that had been requested today. But nonetheless, I do think that maybe we go ahead and try to schedule something for one day. Is it next week? Is that too soon for everyone's schedule, or what's everybody? Our goal is to, let's see, our drafts are due to the mayor's office by May 15th, with her plans to deliver this blueprint or input from each committee, subcommittee, to the governor's office by May 18th. And today is obviously the May the 7th. So I guess I'd recommend we try to schedule a day next week.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Scott, this is Elodie, if I may. I have the calendar pulled up for next week for the spots that are still available for a Zoom call, because the other committees are also scheduling things. If that helps, if you all want to come up with some name or some dates and times, I can look to see if it's available.
What about the next Thursday? You want to throw out some times that's available, sometimes that are currently available?
They're going to give you enough time
Yes.
to get a summary into the mayor? That's pretty
I
close.
think we might want to try Tuesday or Wednesday if possible.
I think
Okay.
Tuesday looks good. We don't have any council meetings whatsoever. They were all canceled. We were supposed to go on a chamber trip, Andy, next week, right?
Is Tuesday at 1 available? Same time,
Yes.
Tuesday at 1?
I'm okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's the 12th, Tuesday, May the 12th at 1 o'clock.
Yes,
That works for me.
that works for everybody.
It works for me.
So if we could potentially get the questionnaire filled out and back to Quinn and Elodie, we can kind of do a composite document on that might, Scott, we could send out and hopefully everybody have a chance to look at and work from that if you think that's a good idea.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with that, Kevin.
Just
Hey,
one
Kip,
thing.
can you hear me? Hey, Kip, it's Michael.
can.
Can you hear me? One
Yep.
thing to put in the back of your head, I've just read an interesting little report this morning, very early, but in the states where they've been doing curbside pickup for where it's appropriate, for merchants where it's appropriate, the consumer response has been phenomenal. And
Oh,
they
good.
seem to be, the consumer seems to be suggesting that they would actually prefer to do that, not across the board,
Mhm.
than Amazon Prime. And
Wow.
so
Yeah.
the industry is buzzing about that feedback in the last 48 hours. That doesn't mean that anyone's going to beat Amazon. It does mean we're about 2 weeks into this, and there is some in zeitgeist out there to support the local merchant over Amazon if it's as seamless as the curbside has been so far.
Yeah, I
So
was going to say,
that's kind of
that's great news and great feedback, Michael, because, obviously, at least for me, curbside restaurant has been a savior, so if they'll do
Yeah,
it
I mean,
for food.
this is kind of your wheelhouse to think about how the local enterprise might think about that. There seems to be something in this where people are attracted to the idea.
Yeah,
Just
it seems like it's here to stay. I agree.
an
Well,
interesting,
more than that, they'd rather, this is more of a subjective thing. They want to buy local, and if it's easy, if the businesses learn how to execute it almost as conveniently as Amazon Prime, all things being equal, they kind of want to do business locally.
I don't know if anybody is a North Ender on the call or spends that much time in town, but it kind of warmed my heart as a ex-owner of the Parquet. That place is packed.
Oh, it's packed. It is a
You
monster.
there's people literally driving around like they were in the 60s
I
trying to
saw it.
find a bay.
I drove by it. Yes, I drove by it
Awesome.
recently, and you're right. It's probably busier than it's ever been, and I'm pleased to see that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point.
Very good.
Okay, guys.
Anything else anybody wants to add before we adjourn?
I just want to make one quick note. With open meetings law, we can disperse information via email and electronic communication, but we're not allowed to adopt anything. We're not allowed to vote on anything. We're not allowed to really to discuss the business of this subcommittee, except for on these special video conference open meetings. So I just want to point that out as we start to do some email.
All right, thanks.
Good.
All right.
Thank you all for participating.
Okay.
We'll look forward to catching up again next Tuesday.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.